looking for in an athlete who's trying to perform a push-up, I'm really only looking for one thing first of all. It's a pretty simple movement. It's what we would call an FBE in the gymnastics realm, which is just gymnastics lingo for a fundamental body weight exercise. So it's really not too difficult to perform, but there are some issues and things that I do look for, such as flexibility and midline stability, when I'm seeing somebody perform a push-up and perform it accurately. There are, for instance, the first thing I'm going to look for is whether or not somebody can hold this thing called the hollow body position before I usually get them into performing other advanced movements. Now, the hollow body is a pretty simple exercise. It's more of a static iso hold. I'm really looking for a globally flexed position with my lower back pegged to the ground. Can you hold that? Yep. Why is that relevant? Well, when I see somebody performing a push-up, they usually tend to look a little bit somewhat like this, and they're sagging around the midline of the body. Now that's a red flag to someone like myself, who is a form Nazi and prefers some pretty high-quality push-ups. So if you're going to perform a push-up, I'm usually looking for a pretty tight arch in that back. You're flaring your scapula, which is this upper portion of your body right here, which is connected to the traps right here. I'm looking for somewhat extended. Are you able to keep a straight line? Yes? Okay, you're solid. But it's a pretty high mountain to climb for some people who haven't even done a push-up before in their life. And there are some things leading up to it that I would obviously recommend before you're going to make that jump into a full arm, two-arm push-up. One of the earlier progressions for a push-up exercise is to merely get somebody on the wall. You're having your index finger pointed up right here. Are you able to give me somewhat of a decent range of motion? For somebody who's incredibly overweight, it's going to be hard to perform something like this, so this is why I wouldn't have them on the ground right away. Can you give me a somewhat decent range of motion? How far can you go with your elbows tight? Can't go that tight? Okay, go even wider. Can you touch your nose to the wall? I have a hat on, so my nose isn't touching the wall, but can you go even further down? Yes? Touch the wall with your nose. Even lower. Touch the wall with your nose. Now the reason why that's relevant is because the leverage is a little different when you're on the ground with your hands in front of you. Now when someone performs a push-up and they're sagging, they're like, I can perform the hollow body just fine. I can get on my back and hold this for 3 minutes. But what I can't do is transfer the mind-muscle connection. When I'm doing the actual push-up, I sag when I go down. Or I'm a little bit off, like I got my elbows flaring out. So what I would usually have them do is focus on being able to have a higher quality of movement in an easier exercise. And you want, in terms of specificity, you want the exercise that you're doing, which is easier, to be relevant to the push-up. So one thing I like to do, for women this is especially popular, is the knee push-up. And the reason why this is so popular for women is when there's the added factor of less upper body strength, I can take the knees. Now I'm shortening the lever, right? So I've got from my knees to my shoulders, I'm able to perform a push-up relatively easy. I'm able to concentrate on the quality of the movement, and I'm not so concerned with things like doing the movement right away for ego's sake. When somebody's performing a push-up and they aren't able to keep that strong, tight midline arch, and that usually tells me that they need to start working on, from here up to the shoulder, the upper body pressing strength, and the knee push-up is great for that. So when you're going down, there are some things to take into consideration. You got the elbow positioning. Where are your elbows going? Are they going out and flaring out to the side? That's wrong. When you're bringing them in tight, they're going behind you. They're going at least to a 90. Right here, I got my chin touched to the ground. If you can only give me this far, that's fine. And back up. Notice how my elbows are going behind me. It's essential that the elbows are going behind you. If they're flaring out, say if it's usually also attributed to an improper hand position. So if my pointer fingers are pointed inward, then obviously my elbows, as you can see, are going to go out. And the only reason I wouldn't recommend this is because it's not conducive to the upper body pressing strength. What you're trying to do is work the muscle, not the joint. So when you got a lot of pressure on the joint, which I'm certainly a fan of joint strength and tendon integrity, but in this case what we're focusing on is getting the person to work the muscle. We're having them work the tricep muscle, the anterior delt, which is the front right here, the rear delt, the upper back, the chest, and we're having them keep a tight midline hollow body position, so it's going to be working your core as well, and somewhat in the legs. Alright, so going down, elbows behind. Down, elbows behind. Notice how my index finger is pointed forward, and if you lack if there is some added discomfort in the wrist, you can of course turn them out, not too wide, just somewhat at an angle I feel comfortable with. Down, up, too hard, take it back a notch. Alright, down, up, too hard, go right here, nose to wall, 90. See how my elbows are going behind? It's absolutely essential to keep that shape as you're descending into push-up. Now there really isn't much to discuss when it comes to the push-up other than keeping the legs together when I'm performing the exercise. And if you got that down, it's pretty simple. You usually make a mental note to yourself to keep your legs glued together when you're performing that push-up and not trying to go too far or too wacky. Just keep them in tight. If wrist flexibility is uncomfortable, it has a lot to do with the hands being in a pronated position. This is uncomfortable for some people. Granted, it seems kind of unusual that people will be complaining about wrist flexibility, but it does come up, believe it or not. So, to take away that factor of discomfort, I usually will have them working on these push-up handles right here. What do? They're going to have me have my hands in a neutral position. Neutral. This is a flexed, pronated right here. What I'm going to have them do, or hyperextended, sorry. You're going to have them going from this position to a neutral push-up grip position. And what this does is it takes away the stretch you're going to get on the wrist that people find gives them discomfort. And so when they go down, they notice that stretch on the wrist is taken away. If you can't go full 90 on the push-up bars, just go down as far as you can. I'm looking for somewhat, I usually go beyond a 90 with my push-ups just because I can get away with that. I've done them for a while. When I'm looking for somebody doing push-ups on handles, you're just giving me, about right here is fine. 1, 2, 3. Keep the midline arch, and your elbows are going behind you. 1, 2, 3. Alright, just one last detail before we tie up the video. It's absolutely important to remember your head positioning as you're going down into the push-up. And the reason why that's important is if I'm going down and my head is protruding somewhat and not retracted to the point to where my chest is hitting the ground before my nose is, the reason why it would interfere if my head is protruding a little bit further down going into the push-up is because that's going to interfere with my range of motion. What I'm looking for every single time is a 90 degree or a full beyond 90 degree extension with the chest or the pelvis or the lower abs touching the ground. Granted that each person's body structure and musculature is going to be different, but it's absolutely important to keep the head retracted, the body in a tight line. And so that's why head position is important. And there's your first part in the push-up progression. I'm Chris, and good luck.